Hi, so thank you very much for having me. I hope this is also visible on Zoom, and I hope you can all hear me well. I cannot see the chat anymore. My name is Gabor. I'm a software engineer. By day, I work at a company which I co-founded nearly 20 years ago today, which is a language technology company, and we absolutely do not work with Go there. But I also do a whole lot of other things. And one of the things is a service which I built last December, this January. I built it in Go. And this is what I want to tell you about. I call it RSS Parrot. You will understand in a second why that is. I want to explain what it does. It has to do with Mastodon and the Fediverse and RSS feeds, and how I built it in like really a tiny, the tiniest imaginable VPS from Vulture for $3.50 a month, which is less than I normally spend on coffee a day. So a couple of words about me, sort of to set expectations. I look at myself in software more or less as a generalist. I don't have like one specialization. I do a lot of things all over the place. So I'm pretty sure that everything that I'm talking about today, for every single thing, there's going to be someone or multiple people among you who know a lot more about that, which is cool because maybe we can have a conversation after that and maybe I can learn from you. And another thing to know about me is I like things that are hard to debug or somehow challenging. GPU shaders, so that is like the actual programs that run in graphics cards are like that. You cannot attach a debugger. If you don't know what's going on, you can paint pixels, maybe, if you get that far. Another thing like that is microcontrollers, where you cannot have a debugger. Maybe you can like flash a light to kind of get some diagnostic output. Why is this thing not working? And the thing which I dealt with the RSS Parrot, particularly in the Mastodon part, protocols, which are only vaguely defined and there are no reference implementations and there's not a whole lot of material out there. So you have to just figure it out, teasing out how it works. So I said I'm mostly not working with Go in my 20s. So 20s is it's not like the 2020s, it's my 20s. I worked mostly with C++, that older version, which still didn't have like the auto keyword in it. In my 30s, most of the work that I did was in C# and .NET. And since I turned 44, the fun things I mostly use in JavaScript because it's just so easy to share and the browser is just such an accessible platform. And with Go, I'm really a rookie. So this is the biggest thing that I created in Go. It has about 4,000 lines of code, which is more than a weekend project, but still it's a tiny thing. Every time I come back to Go, which is maybe once a year, once every 2 years, I kind of have to relearn the syntax a little bit. And then every time it's also really discover like, oh, I really like this language. This is exactly what I would have done if I designed this myself. So that's a cool feeling. This is one of the microcontroller things that I built last year. It's a little clock with an Arduino chip in the middle. And it's like really, really exact. It's like even the justice like compensates for the crystals drift depending on room temperature and whatnot. It's cool. And this is what I mean when I say like shader programming. So typically machine learning also does this, just not that interesting visually here, but if you want to use graphics cards for what they were really meant for, then this is what you get. All right, so what is the RSS Parrot about? What is the itch that I was scratching at here? I really like Mastodon. Question. Who is or has been on Twitter, hand says, among you? A couple of Twitter folks. Who is or has had an account on Mastodon? Somewhat less, but you know, quite a few of you. So I will do a little bit of explaining about Mastodon. It's a lot like Twitter. It's a microblogging service. You can post things, other people can follow you. You can see what people that you follow have posted, but it's decentralized. I also really like blogs. I'm not going to ask about blogs. Everybody knows blogs. By that I mean, I think it's a really great aspect of the decentralized internet that we have blogs. Like, I think we all see how we are suffering from these walled gardens that is, all the fan companies and whatever. And blogs even have sort of a renaissance, I would say. And one good way to follow blogs is to have an RSS reader. And I've been really missing an RSS reader, but I looked into that a couple of times over the last few years. Most of them are like, I need to create an account and they will kind of pull the feeds for me. Why would I need to create an account to read blogs? I don't like the whole idea. And then I realized there are a couple of really offline ones, like offline as in I don't need to sign up for a centralized service. But I'm already reading Mastodon every day. I don't need another app that I need to open. So I kind of thought like, what if I could have an auto-link thing that would look at the RSS feeds of all the blogs that I'm interested in, whose authors are themselves not on Mastodon, so they're not posting about their work. And when there's something new showing up, they would just post it. So I would get it in my Mastodon timeline, which I'm checking every morning and afternoon anyway. And you can build bots with Mastodon. That in itself is not such a big deal. But what if this could be like sort of a more generic service that everybody could do this, not just me? So sort of like a bridge from RSS feeds into Mastodon or the Fediverse, but Relay sounds silly, so I decided not to call it Relay, but to call it RSS Parrot. So this is just a few words about Mastodon. This is a screenshot from the app that I use to read Mastodon. Mastodon also has a website, so it has a web interface, and you sign up for an instance. You do that over that instance's web UI. I'm not so much friends with that UI. So this is what I see in my app. This is my Keyline. That's me at the top. That's just my context, readability, and social. That's a post by a hiking blog from Taiwan that I follow. And then there's another post below that. An interesting thing to see is this person's alias is computer at chaos.social. So he's on a different instance from my instance is Gerard. So it's really like email addresses, right? And these instances can talk to each other in the background. And if like email servers also talk to each other to pass emails and receive emails, they pull information, like when I search for somebody's profile, that's on another instance, essentially another server that pulls the profile information. And if somebody follows me from different instances, that my instance essentially pushes those news, those posts to all these other instances where I have fans. If at any point something is like not clear, just stop me. We can, particularly later on, really make this a conversation. How does the Parrot work? It kind of pretends to be something like a Mastodon server, but Mastodon is built on this actual thing, which is a protocol activity pub. So it's not a Mastodon server, but you can interact with it. Mastodon servers can interact with it. So if you want to follow an RSS feed, then you basically post a new tweet, post a new message. You can @mention people just like on Twitter in Mastodon. So you @mention this verb account at rssparrot.net, and you just include a fully qualified URL. Then the Parrot will somehow, so my service receives this message. It looks up that address, sees if this is a feed or this is an HTML page, which declares the feed. If it manages to fetch and parse that feed, then it sort of creates an account, which will be relay posts to this feed and gives back the address of that account to you. So I requested the URL ludwig.mataroa.blog. By the way, check out this guy. He's hilarious. Really, really great blog. And the account, which was created in RSS Parrot, it's derived from the name of the URL. So all the slashes and whatnot are replaced with dots. So that's how I get ludwig.mataroa.blog. And then it's an account in my instance. And on the right, also from my app, this is the profile page on this account. So there's a little explanation. Hey, this is an automated account. Don't expect to be interacting with the person or the author here. And then the description of the blog itself and the URL. All right. The RSS Parrot does have a little web interface, read-only web interface. That's sort of, in Mastodon, it's kind of an expectation that at one point you can leave the Mastodon app and see the profile or the posts of a particular user through an HTML, so web interface. So I wanted to create that, but basically there's nothing you can do here. This is a read-only interface. This shows the same profile info about this Parrot account, plus it's like a long list of the posts that have been retrieved. You can see the latest post at the top. Okay, a few words about ActivityPub. What is this protocol that these Mastodon and other servers use to talk to each other? It is a World Wide Web Consortium standard or proposal. I don't exactly get what the difference is. It can be read at this address. It's very vaguely specified. So this is an actual, this is like the second paragraph or like on the first page of that specification. So this is, you would think this is kind of meant as an illustration, but it's almost like the specification itself. It takes a lot of experimentation to figure out what's going on. So what is the problem space that this service exists in? One part of it is this whole ActivityPub protocol. I need to implement at least the minimum viable subset of this protocol so I can interact with these Mastodon instances. And I need to deal with these RSS and Atom feeds. I need to understand what's in them. I need to pull them at regular intervals and, just detect if there's something new showing up. A little bit about the ActivityPub protocol. So this is I think this is called the, exactly the actor page. So this is what you get if you retrieve this URL at the top, which will be my actor in my instance. It's a JSON file. It's even more than, okay, I will get into the funny things. Essentially, it declares a bunch of URLs where you can query my posts, where a very important one is my inbox. So if somebody messages me, then it needs to be addressed to that inbox URL. I have a public key, which is also needed in some interactions. I deleted a couple of lines to make it shorter. And the interesting one, this is I think it's more Mastodon and not ActivityPub specific. The instance also has a shared endpoint. So that's important because if my account has 500 followers for a particular instance, and I want to make sure that my message shows up in their timeline, one way would be to send 500 different calls so that it lands in all of their inboxes. But the shared inbox is just basically telling the whole instance, whoever follows this person, there's a new message there. So I can just send one message to the full instance. And the actual messages, this is an actual post. So when I post, that means I create an activity. The type of the activity is a note. And there are two address fields, to and CC, and I don't even entirely remember the difference, but depending on how you put the different addresses into these, this can be either kind of like a private message or something. Mastodon has these strange visibility levels. It's visible to everyone or only that person or somebody on the timeline. So you have to play a little bit with those to and CC fields as well. All right. It is a really weird protocol in many respects. It's not a REST API. It's just get and post requests with some JSON payload. That JSON payload, it doesn't have like an explicit schema like what should be what. Sometimes a field is polymorphic, like depending on the activity, we'll have a different object with different fields there. Really fun to parse. Sometimes when it's just an address, if it's a single address, one server would just put it in as a string. The other would put an array of strings with a single item, and you just have to figure all this out. There is this JSON LD. Have you ever heard about JSON LD, linked data? All right. I would be really interested to hear about that because I haven't been really able to figure out what the purpose of it is. It kind of vaguely reminds me of SOAP, where you have data, but you also have like content, which is sort of like type information about it. And it needs to go into that add context field, which I collapsed here at the top. But basically, I just implemented the bare minimum that these servers accept what I'm saying, and I just didn't deal with this part. Who has heard about HTTP signatures? One. I never heard about HTTP signatures before. That's also an RFC. I don't know if it's a standard, or also just a proposal. It's essentially a way to include signatures in an HTTP header to verify your message, to verify that you are the sender of this HTTP request. And in some scenarios, their ActivityPub wants to be sure that somebody posts a message at me, this other server. I mean, I don't know who the server that's posting that message is. It sort of requests an HTTP signature, which when I receive the message, I need to call up the profile of the sender, get that public key, which we saw previously, and verify that the HTTP message is correctly signed. So a lot of strange things going on. All right. I think I will speed up a little bit. I don't go so much into RSS and Atom. I think you're familiar with those. They also have their little quirks that in RSS, for instance, content can be either plain text or HTML, but you don't need to declare which. So you don't really know what to do with, this encoded HTML markup. Is that supposed to be text, or is that supposed to be HTML? I think that was one of the reasons why they invented Atom, which is kind of clearer about it, but it's also very permissive about what fields should be there, which sometimes make it different to figure out if an item is a new item or an updated item. Have I seen this before? Have I seen this before, but now it is a different timestamp? So there are all those things. One thing which was really useful, are you familiar with Kaggy? I think it's Kaggy, so it's a search engine. You actually need to pay for it beyond something like 5 or 10 search requests. And it's not like DuckDuckGo is essentially a front end for Bing, as far as I know. They actually build their own index. I actually pay for them because they provide interesting and very different search results from Google. They had this initiative, which is the Kaggy Small Web. They essentially collected something like 10,000 URLs of blogs or like small, websites with interesting content. It's a curated thing, so people curate this. This was really good because this was like exactly 10,000, it's text file essentially of 10,000 RSS and Atom feed URLs, which were really good because I could run my feed parsers on them and make sure that all the weirdnesses, or most of the weirdnesses, are ironed out before the service went live. So what does the Parrot do? On the one part, it's an ActivityPub server. It is to interact with all these other ActivityPub servers, Mastodon servers. Otherwise, it's a feed follower, so it has this ticking clock, periodically checks up on the feeds that it follows. There's a little bit of magic there, like the longer a feed has been inactive, the less frequently I check it because, resources are not endless. And it also kind of like deduces the feed URL from an HTML page and the other way around. And there's this website which I showed you. So this is the thing that needs to be built. And this is what it looks like in the end. So this is kind of like the central piece of this talk. A little, I wouldn't even call it poor man's, just like a very low resource in the Matchbox architecture of this ad. So I have the code. It is public, by the way. I think I had the link at the first slide. I have the code in GitHub. There's a GitHub action to build this. So I can just build inside GitHub on a tag. The build's output is uploaded to a container registry on Amazon. These are really small containers. I don't need the whole tag history. So I entirely stay in the free tier with this, also with my other containers that I store there. Sorry, images. And the thing on the right, the big box, that is the actual VPS where I'm running it. It's in Vulture, which is like DigitalOcean, but they're a little bit smaller, a bit tech-bro-y, but they had this really great $3.50 VPS in their New York data center. And that is 0.5 gigabyte of memory and 10 gigabyte of disk and 1 VCP. That's what you get for that. So that's where this needs to fit. In the VPS itself, I have very little. Most importantly, this is Not Ubuntu, but damn, I won't say it too fast. Come on, what is the typical Linux that you use inside Docker also? Very small distro. Hold on. Alpine. So it has an Alpine Linux in it. It has a firewall. It has Tailscale, which is a VPN. I'll talk about that in a second. In the VPS itself, there is one service running, which is the deploy webhook. So it's running on the outside because it needs to, like, with admin permissions, update the app when I push a new build. And of course, it has SSH, so I can log in. And then there's a couple of Docker containers. I call them managed. It's not really managed. Essentially, I just store all the Docker Compose files and everything that is related to these in a separate GitHub repo. So I can just like really easily recreate this from the repo if I need to. I have an Nginx web server, which I use as a reverse proxy. So that serves the HTTPS URLs and proxies the requests to my local service and certbot. And it has my Parrot service and live stream, which I will talk about in a sec. And all the data is in volumes of the VPS's file system mounted into Docker. Most importantly, you don't see a SQL Server image here because I'm using SQLite, which is an in-process, very robust, very low footprint database, and it's just enough for this purpose. I'm watching this whole thing through Uptime Robot. Livestream creates a streaming backup of the database into block storage on Amazon. So there is a backup, a continuous backup. And I collect metrics, which I run in the different VPS that I have in Victoria DB, in Victoria Metrics. And yeah, a couple of the interesting things. Again, hands up. Do you all know about Tailscale here? One person knows. Okay, two. I'm totally going to be evangelizing here. I mean, like, no affiliation with them. I'm not getting, any cut for this or anything. But Tailscale is magic. It's like one of the, it's like one of the things that makes the internet a pleasure these days. It's a mesh VPN, so you can actually just enroll your different devices. My laptop is also enrolled. It's going to be important. One thing is for the VPS itself, I don't even open port 22 on the internet, the public internet-facing adapter. I only open it towards my VPN, so it's an extra layer of security. And the other thing is, when I was trying to figure out how this whole ActivityPub thing works, and I needed to interact with actual servers, I needed to query some message from them and see what they give back. I needed to, I needed for them to have a way to reach me through a URL, but I really didn't know what was going on, so I had to do this in a debugger. How do you do it? So you have to have something out there running at an HTTPS -- something, but you need to debug it locally. This is possible with Tailscale as well. So I just have some Nginx running up there, which is a reverse proxy serving an HTTPS address. And it proxies those requests back to my VPN address. That happens to be the address, so that 100.67, that's the address of my laptop on my VPN. And in VPN, I just fire up the code that I'm running in the Golang debugger, and I can see what's going on. So this would not have been possible without Tailscale. All right. A few words about this weird SQLite and Livestream combo. Livestream, by the way, as far as I know, also written in Go. And the name escapes me. It is essentially one person's project. It essentially runs as a service. It connects to, I think, the forward log of SQLite. And every change that comes in, it just streams out to some block storage. And then you can also have like a CLI and a command line command to restore that database whenever you need it. So this is like a continuous backup. Livestream, I have the URL there. This is where you can find it, and there's this really cool blog post about it. I would, that's another post that I would recommend to read if you want to know more about this. And so I must admit, it's not all golden. There have been funny things. in this very constrained, maybe it's because of the single vCPU, I really could not. SQLite should be concurrent, but every time I had concurrent operations, basically one of those would just failed with some exclusion error. So I just ended up putting a read-write lock around my SQL accesses. And, this is not under such a big load, it works. And don't do this at home. And with Lightstream by default, and this took me a while to realize, it has a 1 second sync interval. It's a parameter in its config. So because I keep checking a whole lot of feeds and I update the database based on the result, like when did I last check this feed, I constantly have these little writes into the database. So essentially every second, Lightstream had some change to push to block storage. And very soon this ended up just like exhausting my operations quota with Amazon. And when I saw like, oh my God, this is supposed to be free and I have like an $8 charge. Then I looked into this and now it's 5 minutes. So there was a funny thing about using Go in Alpine. I don't know if any of you ever ran into this. It needs, by default, Alpine doesn't have this GCC, so basically this native C tooling. And if the way I compiled my Go program, I don't know the details of this, that was needed. And I think I could have gotten rid of that, except for some of the libraries that I was using really needed it, so I couldn't change that. Essentially, what it ended up meaning, by default, the build action in GitHub works in an Ubuntu environment, and the image that was created in Ubuntu would not run in Alpine. So I ended up building inside an Alpine Docker image in GitHub Actions, which kind of adds half a minute build time. But I don't do this so often, so it works. This is the Docker file that I use to both build and run the service. And now I'm kind of like sliding over into stuff that is more conversational, and we can just hang around afterwards and chat. Coming from the C# world, for me, it's very natural to build an application with some dependency injection framework. And I see that these exist in Go, but I don't know if it's like, I'm kind of really interested in y'all's experience. Do you use dependency injection when you build your app? Do you not? What framework do you use for that? I ended up using FX. I know there is Wire, which uses code generation, and I even thought like that is like a more Go thing to do. But there was, at that point, I was beyond my threshold of too many new things to come to terms with, so I chickened out and didn't go with Wire. But I'm generally happy with the way it turned out. Do you use any dependency injection frameworks in the apps that you work with? No. So we would try to about a bit. And usually when you say too big or something, then maybe your service is getting a bit big and whatever. And it's just not dramatic. You see where exactly what parameters. I see. My main thinking here was I have these different components that my application is made up of, and I want them unit testable in isolation. So I don't need to, they don't like grab all the other dependencies, and one way to do that is dependency injection. But maybe there are other ways in Go, but this is where it kicks in. Like I'm coming from like a different paradigm. Awesome. That the enterprise system, and they can have and test the mock interface and so on. So this testing isolation is really in Go. When you use some dependency injection, use frameworks, we just name usually everything package. Usually just explicitly put everything in. This is what I ended up doing here too. This is what I mean by this big composition root. So my main is basically just this big thing that puts together the different pieces of the application, except it also uses this framework. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, this is really going, I said I am going into the weeds. You don't need to care so much about this particular thing. I ended up like creating one class, one file, which is called repo, where I wrap up all of the database stuff. And it's big and ugly, and all of the SQL interaction I do by like SQL commands and, like result reader, and it gets so tedious. And this is like one place where the C# world has this thing called entity framework, where you literally just define with some annotations, you define data structures that are directly mapped by this framework through a database structure, and even generates maintenance scripts to create and update the structure. And you write queries in code, which it by some magic translates to SQL, which is fine up to a certain level of complexity. And this is still beyond that level. So I was missing that here. I don't know if there's, I don't know how that is done with Go. That could be another topic to talk about. Another question, also quality gate. So C# people, also Java people, are really big on SonarQube, which is this headmaster with, a stick standing next to you and pointing out, there's an extra space here. This is lowercase and should be uppercase, and also like more serious problems like this function has too big a cyclometric complexity and you should just break it up into smaller ones. Whenever I use it in C#, it has this really long list of problems in my code, which is fine. That's why I use it. And in Go, it was kind of like not much was coming. So I was kind of wondering, maybe the checks are not that elaborate for Go because it's not a main target language on this side. Maybe it's the philosophy of Go. Like a lot of what these SonarQube things do for C# is you just have a lot of different ways to do things. And then you have a house style and you all agree to do it this particular way. And when you do it some other way, it kind of goes, then no, don't do it that way. And Go is kind of like, there's usually only one way to do things with a bit of an exaggeration, so maybe there's not so much of policing to do. I don't know. I'm also curious about your experiences with these. What? If any. But we can leave it for the chat afterwards. And then, some of my more of my experiences working with Go from not so much of a Go background. With every language or framework, the ecosystem is a really big factor. And the libraries that I found for the tasks that I had were just really, really great. There was Go Query to muck about in HTML structure. I didn't need to do any of that parsing myself, of course. There's a library for parsing the RSS and atom feeds. There's a library to sanitize HTML because you cannot trust whatever comes from the internet from within these feeds. And I even found a library with the last change 4 years ago, which just works for HTTP signatures. And I was so grateful for that. Really, that person, thank you. And yeah, this is my very last slide here. I set up, I think I mentioned that one of these slides, this was the first. I never had this kind of metrics and analytics dashboard before. I used the Prometheus client library, which essentially collects system-level metrics, plus you can define your own metrics. And then a different component, which is often Prometheus, but that's a bit big and bulky. So I use Victoria metrics, which is a drop-in replacement, by the way, written in Go, which basically adds the time dimension. So this was a surprise to me. What these do is your application keeps track of a bunch of values and exposes them over an API endpoint. And this Victoria metrics service, periodically, every minute or every 5 minutes, whatever is your period, queries the values and takes the snapshot. And if you want to have time series, it stores the historical values in its own little database. And built on top of that, you can go to Grafana, and this is still also in the free tier of Grafana, and define a bunch of queries to visualize various metrics that you have here. And 2 of these are system metrics, so CPU time and RAM usage, and all the other ones are specific to my business logic. So how many different requests I have coming in, how long do I take to serve those requests, how long these requests take when I talk to other ActivityPub instances. I wanted to get a feel on like, how is this going to work? And then in the top right, it's more like, how many feeds are in the queue or due for checking. It has happened that I messed up something and this queue just went up because my feeds were not getting checked. And then I saw like, there were no errors in any log, but like, that's not right. And how many tweets I'm sending out and that kind of thing. So this was also sort of the first for me. It's a little bit, if you haven't done this sort of observability for an application that you are maintaining, I would say think twice, because it's really addictive. So it's kind of like a retina screen. Like before I used retina screens, I'm like, yeah, nice. And after my first retina screen, there's no going back to non-retina screens. So after having this sort of observability, there's no going back to running something with less. So that was it. Thank you. Bye. I'm just opening to see if there were any interesting questions. Okay, there was one. There was actually one question in the chat. What version of Go have you used? It is a version that already has generics, but I don't remember the exact. Can it be 21? I don't know where we are exactly.
It's Ref 121 in the Docker file.
Yeah, exactly.
You can pro. That's what the keys work. Sorry for the echo. We have been working on this before and somehow it came back. So I know it was not great for the audio, but there is a recording and we hope you understood some things. First of all, yeah, thank you very much for
Thank you.
Questions from the crowd. Anybody wants to practice cube? You ready? And Orion.
I establishing I saw that in the internet and it's a book. There's a processing language that's called, it is called Caddy. I believe.
Oh, you mean Caddy? You mean Nginx, the web server, and you're referring to Caddy?
I mean, it has both independent. That very thing is.
It's so interesting that you bring that up, because I only learned about Caddy through a mention by the EFF, who were talking about maybe retiring certbot because you don't need it because you have things like Caddy. And I never knew about it until maybe 5 days ago. And I was like, that's interesting. And it's particularly interesting because I don't know if you've heard the main maintainer of Nginx left the project because of some conflict with the organization, which made me think, like, Nginx is one of the things that is running the internet largely. If this goes the wrong way, we are in trouble. And I was very relieved to say, oh, maybe there's Caddy. Well, thank you.
It's a long question. So the mic, and you put it in that direction as the speaker, then it angles. And now I'm going the other way. No way.
Okay.
Any more questions? So yeah, that's I suppose about households about things. And now as illness, like what thing that you've discovered, like what things have you discovered that you saw now too, but and I forgot that. I'm the stage in the future, or updates the time with the working headers of them. Like what's it sounds wasn't to make about that and which well to you all. So
about our certain fees, you mean specifically. But there was one thing I came across which from other experiences with file formats and data didn't really surprise me, but it's still a big sigh, is that there's a lot of invalid data out there. And this module also uses just built in like some of our with Go, which is really finicky about. There's an invalid Unicode character here, which is also just in the low ASCII ranges. Sometimes they have these, I don't even know the scopes, it's just been there. And there's a bunch of fail because of that. And I kind of want to still go into that and do some amount of sanitization, because there is, like, if I go back, so there's a fair number of feed requests which fail. And those usually have to do with those so that I could like remove some of those yellow points. And another one was, there was another one. So what I do, and this unfortunately a conceptual thing, what I do here is if I get the feed usually declares the URL of the site that it belongs to, and I use that URL to be the account ID. But sometimes the same URL has multiple thumbs. And I can't really deal with that. And at one point, particularly, I saw a lot of websites which sort of programmatically generate feeds by theory parameters, by question mark, and then there is filter conditions. And I didn't want like a lot of machine-generated content to flood this system. So at one point, I said I will just ignore the query part of the feed. But then some websites like Intuit, they distinguish the different accounts by those query parameters and a couple of others. And then I started adding exceptions for those. And I told them the way it's going to go at this point.
Hear the body in the thing or excuse it light through. And especially if you did with finger, for instance, the most server you had to restart later.
Some of the if I use it in Hager, things that we call about it. So I haven't not lost this server yet. I hope that will not happen, but to the extent that I double checked it, no backup and recovery works until you've tested that recovery works. And I've regularly restored the snapshot from the wall storage to my computer, actually. Partly because I wanted to see the actual production database when I was tracking down some issues. So I verified that it works. And otherwise, it's just like working in the background. There was this one issue that the very frequent syncs and updates exhausted my request quota. And then I just changed that frequency from 1 second to, I think it's a minute or something, which is still, at the worst case, a minute's worth of data. Does it answer your question? I just realized I want to do another shout out talking about stuff written in Go. There is another activity pub server, and I've been also in interaction with some of the people who are maintaining it, which is not Mastodon. Mastodon, as far as I know, it's a monolith app written in Ruby. And there's another, there are a bunch of other ones, but this one is Go to Social. So shout out to Go to Social. That is written in Go. Unfortunately, for some reason that we are still tracking down, we cannot interact with the RSS Parrot yet, but we are working on it.